Castro and it's a curious thing. I did the interview with him. I don't know how much it helped him, but it certainly didn't hurt him. He used me as his media to reach the world. And I, in the same way, used him to set me off on a career of a lifetime. But nothing will ever compare to that one morning on top of the La Plata in the Sierra Maestra. That is the tide in the affairs of man. It's a sort of the hinge that decides history, decides battles, and decides also a man's life.
What kind of government would you establish? Would you be president?
We will establish a real representative and democratic government. I don't think in being president. That a president who ought to be elected for the people of Cuba in free election, the most short time possible after the finishing the revolution. Important.
From his stronghold in the wild Sierra Maestra mountains, Cuba's Fidel Castro emerged triumphant after 2 years of guerrilla warfare against the Batista regime. In his lifetime, the bearded cigar-smoking idealist has become a legend. Many had no clear idea of his beliefs or his program, but knew only of his cause and his personal dedication. Now his words strike terrific enthusiasm. To his military victory, Fidel Castro has deftly added a broad base of popular support, built in a matter of days by this hero's procession. Another source of power for Cuba's man of the hour.
Little did the Cuban people suspect that Castro would betray their cause and deliver them into the hands of the most ruthless of all tyrannies, into the iron grip of communism.
After nearly a half-century in power, ailing leader Fidel Castro is stepping down as Cuba's president. The 81-year-old Castro's overnight announcement effectively ends his rule of almost 50 years over Cuba, positioning his 76-year-old brother Raul for permanent succession to the presidency. Castro's announcement comes after recent health problems. In July...
How are you?
Fine.
Hey, we finally get together. This is my brother James.
Hello, James.
Partner on this project.
That's a neat little camera. That's what we should use. You know, it's sort of like the end of an era has come, because I don't think Raul can hang on to it. So it's you know, it's a weird situation. But I sincerely feel that where we got stuck was on this after Fidel what? You know, that's why they don't want anybody there right now. Today, I mean, you know, the problem we have with Castro, you have to ask for permission. Then I just did it. You know, I just didn't ask him permission of anybody.
Well, there's something to be said for that, I think. If you don't ask, they can't turn you down.
That's why I said it's the old journalist saying, ask for permission, they turn it down, and then you go and do it.
You wanted to know how this all happened in the first place. We were doing a feature for the old close-up show on dialects in Ontario, and I went to CBC Ottawa and said, I need a cameraman. And they said, oh, we haven't got any staffer, we'll find you a freelancer.
I got $25 a story. I filmed the burning farm or the car crash or whatever it was, and then I drove over to the studio, and then they sort of looked at it, and then sometimes they took it and sometimes they didn't, you know, when there was nothing else going on. But those were the early days of television.
Anyway, I mean, we got along well, and we started talking about stuff we might do, and then it's less than a year later, I think, this phone call came from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and you said, I've just run into this guy from Time magazine, and he's got it in, and I think I can get into the Sierra Maestra, and he said, would you use my footage if I got something? And I said, how much money do you need now? And he said, I don't need money. You can pay me when you get the footage. Asshole. But that's what he did. And he took his equipment in a Volkswagen and he built a secret compartment into the luggage compartment of the back of the Volkswagen in order to escape the police on the way back. But eventually and we put it on the air the night that Fidel walked into Havana.
¡Viva Cuba Libre! ¡Libertad o muerte!
You got to remember that there was all of a sudden this glamorous figure with a beard coming down from the mountains waving a rifle, you know. He was just another one of the Pancho Villa. I mean, nobody knew who he really was.
I would say that your footage and our broadcast of it that New Year's was on the whole sympathetic.
Oh, very. But let me tell you that at least one sentence of this whole interview has been shown more often than most of the interviews ever done afterwards. Because it is a key. It's a key to this man, you know, if you wanted to know what that man thought like or what that man wanted the world to think about him, is in one sentence. You know, all right, so perhaps it was a lie.
What is your political philosophy? Are you a communist or a Marxist?
There is not communism or Marxism in our ideas. Our political philosophy is representative democracy and social justice in a well-planned economy. Well, a matter...
How did you come by your revolutionary ideas?
Well, a matter of temperament, a matter of observation, a matter of analysis, and a matter of study. I hope to improve my English, to explain it you better next time.
¿Quién te defiende? Te quiere vibra en la montaña un rubí cinco franjas y una estrella.
It's an amazing feeling to be back 50 years later. The cars are still the same. Well, the people have changed, of course, but so have I. 50 years ago, I wandered here pretty well penniless, hoping that something would come out of it. I didn't realize what was coming out of it. Still, I wandered past that hotel looking at the people, quite envious, I must say I was at the time. They were sitting there sipping their mojitos. It was the Frank Sinatra, Ava Gardner generation.
I arrived in Cuba in early September of 1958. In other words, at the crucial time of Castro's revolution, but that, of course, I didn't know at the time. Havana was on a high if you had money. They had one cinema called the Shanghai. They had girls on the stage. They stripped down and then offered themselves to the highest bidder. That was Havana at the time. It was run by two things. It was run by Batista and his goon squad, and it was run by the American mafia. Because all the big hotels, they were all mafia casinos. It was just to launder money and to make more money. I must say that when I first went to Cuba, I was politically probably naive. I did not go there to save the world. I went there because I wanted to start a career. It is only once you leave the city itself, when you drove through the countryside towards Santiago, that's when you started to see that there was a pretty widespread misery. And those were the people that obviously hoped that Castro would give him some, liberation.
Are you interested in
old texts, old sources of
well, I'm
information
certainly
and perspectives?
interested in historical texts, but those, unfortunately, they all sort of glorify. That's the trouble with history. History always glorifies the victor. I mean, history is basically a whore, because you never find out what really happened.
I pay a license and I can sell books to the tourists, and I have a little money, more than the other people.
Right.
All the people are waiting.
Waiting for what happens next?
Yes, of course.
Could you talk a little bit about this?
Oh, you know. Yes, I think this country is a very good country, and Fidel Castro also is a nice man. I think it's the man of the last century. But you know, now he's 82 years old, and I don't know. The people are looking for something new.
And Raúl? Is he something new or something old?
We have to wait. We have to wait. We have to wait.
I think Castro has achieved an awful lot. And he did a lot for his society. His health plan is second to none. I mean, he did achieve great things. But look at the costs. I mean, the costs are horrendous for a country. Freedom of speech, I think, is a word unknown in Cuba, or in the present Cuba anyway. You know, I don't know what is the price to pay. Only Castro can answer that. I cannot.
Tell me something about the plight of the ordinary Cuba.
The first plight now is the lack of freedom and justice. And after that, a low standard of living, hundreds of thousands of young men without job. But Cuba is a rich country with a wonderful future if we only have good governments.
Perder su querer. Primero dejar de ser, primero dejar de ser, primero dejar de ser que dejar de ser revolucionario.
I was so fed up with the things I used to do. And one day I simply read in a newspaper that there was a man in the mountains of Cuba. Nobody really knew what he looked like or what he was after. But
trying to make a revolution, and I thought, well, it's better than chasing ambulances. Why don't I go and find this man? So I did. Imagine Cuba as a very long banana. On one end you have Havana, and on the other end you have Santiago. The Sierra Maestra is in the mountain range outside Santiago. There's only one road that goes down the center of the island, called the Carretera Central, or the main highway. I think I had 2 or 3 blowouts. I had to stop, I had to get into a local sort of a bicycle repair shop, and they patched it up, and then I drove on again, and then. So it took me quite a long time to travel along this single highway. There was no military traffic, there was no indication that something was not quite as it ought to be. Until I came to just outside a town of Bayamo, which is close to the Sierra Maestra. The first thing I noticed was a truck. Rebels had hijacked that truck and then ditched it next to the road and burned it, and there were still some carcasses of animals lying there, smoldering actually. A little bit further on, I came on a bus which was burned right in the middle of the road. And that I knew I was now entering into a war zone, or at least a territory that was not quite safe. It was much too far to drive in one day because the road was pretty bad. But I got into Santiago without any problem.
At the beginning, we had not controlled country. We were continually persecuted, but fighting hardly against Batista's forces, after 6 months about, we got the control of the mountain and kept they out. Now we have a big part of the plain too. Really, the only outlaw since the beginning was Batista.
Aquí pensaban seguir ganando el 100% con casas de apartamentos y echar al pueblo a sufrir y seguir de modo cruel contra el pueblo conspirando para seguirlo explotando, y en eso llegó Fidel. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar. Aquí pensaban seguir.
Mi pelota allá. La pelota, Melo. Chao.
En sentido general, el país, la isla, marcha bien, la gente está contenta.
Sí.
¿Qué es lo que es? Porque educación, la mejor del mundo, gratuito. Y la salud está ahí. Siempre hay sus cositas, ¿no? A veces tú quisieras que todo se resolviera en el momento, pero bueno, tú vas al médico y siempre hay una respuesta. Nos faltan algunas cosas, ¿no? Por ejemplo, la alimentación todavía en la bodega, en la carnicería, quisiéramos que un poquito más que llegara. Porque hay mucha corrupción, mucha ilegalidad, mucha inmoralidad. Tenemos entonces aquí en Cuba la cabrona corrupción, jefe, desvían recursos, y no sé, esa gente llegará el momento que ya se le pondrá su fin. Yo te digo que la historia va cambiando y hay que esperar cosas buenas y cosas importantes. Lo que sí, Cuba no, su política, su economía, su sistema como tal social, jamás lo va a cambiar. Y si tú lees la Constitución nuestra, en el preámbulo dice, Cuba es un país de obreros y campesinos. Y más adelante así hay un pensamiento martiano que dice, con bien y para el bien de todos, ¿no? Sí. Y el Che Guevara lo dijo hace más de 50 años, al imperialismo no se le puede dar ni un tantico así, mira, ni así se le puede dar. Por eso digo que ese hombre ha sido lo más grande que ha pasado. Gracias a él.
En cadenas civiles, en afrenta y oprobios unidos, del clarín de escuchar el sonido, a las armas valientes correr.
First of January 2009, Castillo de Morro, Cuba.
When I came out of Castro, I was the new bright kid on the block, the one who can do revolutionaries and that sort of thing. For the rest of my career, I spent 30 years doing wars. I mean, I've covered every war from 1959 to the Gulf.
I don't think the rebellion had ever met much of a chance because both the French colons and the Muslims were definitely for the goal. And
Here's a report by Canadian cameraman Erik Durschmied. After 20 years of the independence he won from the Dutch, Sukarno's revolution remains at the boil, with communists and Muslims at each other's throats.
Look out to the right now. Okay, right down there. Okay, nip on now. There it goes. Ah, look at it burn. Look at it burn. That's great fun. I really like to do that. We really hosed them down, by Joe.
And here they go again. Here come the boat. Let us get into some cover. Come on.
You know, somebody in our profession is like a bullfighter. There is no veteran bullfighter except the cautious one. And if you want to survive, the simple philosophy of a good war correspondent is you get in, you get it, and you get out. Don't hang around, because if you do hang around, you're bound to get hurt. There are very few. When I recall the days when I went to, let's say, Vietnam. In the beginning, I think we were 20. I ended up as the only one coming out alive.
We have just come back from the front line. This attack certainly was the worst attack ever. The battle must have been very, very fierce because the bodies that were lying there were totally mangled beyond description. The Iranians had an initial success, and they threw in all their elite troops, and they were simply cut down to pieces by the Iraqi heavy artillery and, of course, the Iraqi Air Force and the helicopter gunships. It seems that the Iraqis now have definitely cleared all the dry land, and this is all what matters on this part of the land, and pushed all the Iranians into the swamps.
Let me say from the beginning that there might be several kinds of reporters, correspondents, cameramen. They may have different motives. Some do it for financial reasons, because the pay is quite good. Some do it for excitement. And some do it because they got into it and cannot get out of it anymore. And I think I belong into that category. And that is also a result of Castro. Out of 365 days, I was 290 days in some god-awful place. I never got out of the war anymore. And I tried many times afterwards. I tried to get out of it. I did National Geographic. I did Hollywood films. But I was always brought back into what they thought I did best. I was known as Durschmied, the war man. I think nobody can escape his upbringing, his environment, his basic character. And I had the bad fortune to grow up during the war in Austria. I was born on a Christmas day in Vienna in Austria. I lived a relatively calm and happy childhood until the coming of Hitler. My father was called up into the German army, as everybody was at the time, and he didn't survive the war. I did. Although
my house was bombed to bits and everybody else died. And, you know, I saw what happened at the end. Everybody has his own sort of cross to bear, but it's very difficult to explain what World War II actually was. I mean, it's a horror beyond description. So everything else, I think, becomes sort of small. I don't know. There is no small war. You know, small is a drama. If it is in your neighborhood, if it is your family, if it is your dog or your child or your whatever, it is horrible. And I think you will never ever forget about that. And I think that this sort of stayed with me for all my life, although I've always tried to overcome it. But that sort of suffering, that useless suffering, war, I mean, war doesn't solve anything. I mean, you know, we were indoctrinated that you know, we will change the world, everything will become wonderful. And in a sense that the same thing happened to Castro's Cuba, if you want.
Santiagueras, santiagueros, combatientes del ejército rebelde, la lucha clandestina y de cada combate en defensa de la revolución durante estos 50 años. Compatriotas, en estrecha unión, empuñando las poderosas armas que han significado la dirección, las enseñanzas y el ejemplo de Fidel, aprendimos en el rigor de la lucha a transformar sueños en realidades. Por primera vez, el pueblo cubano alcanzaba el poder político. Atrás quedaban 60 años exactos de dominación absoluta del naciente imperialismo norteamericano. Desde el mismo momento del triunfo, se hizo evidente para cada hombre y mujer humilde que la revolución era un justiciero cataclismo social que tocó todas las puertas. Al arribar al primer medio siglo de revolución triunfante, llegue el principal tributo a nuestro maravilloso pueblo, a su ejemplar decisión, vocación solidaria e internacionalista, a su extraordinaria demostración de voluntad, espíritu de sacrificio y confianza en la victoria, en el partido, en su máximo líder y sobre todo en sí mismo. ¡Viva Fidel! ¡Viva la revolución! ¡Viva! ¡Viva Cuba libre! ¡Viva!
This is meant as a sound commentary in case we need it. Listening to his speech, Raúl makes me feel like listening to a record on replay. The same worn-out phrases Fidel has used for 50 years to make his people forget the hardship his regime brought them. Everything is venceremos, we shall win, and lucha final, the final struggle. In the same breath, they are celebrating the end of this final struggle that happened already 50 years ago. Raúl promises that Cuba will never relent on socialism. After all, he can hardly admit that 50 years of communism has been a smashing failure. He puts the blame on Satan America and exhorts his people to more sacrifice and warns of an invasion. That doesn't make sense. The only invasion is that by foreign tourists and their capitalist dollars.
This is a revolution so that in Cuba we have not in the future other revolutions. We want to establish a constitutional, long-life system of peaceful government as essential condition for the progress and happiness of our country.
In Santiago de Cuba, I got into a little motel. I finally, after a long wait, probably was about a week, managed to make contact with the local resistance who believed in what I was doing. He didn't think I was a spy, and he said, go back to Bayamo and go to that bodega. He gave me the name of a little bar down there and just says, Pablo sent you.
Turn right.
Okay.
A derecha.
Well, Bayamo, here we come. I mean, the last time I drove out of this town, I had a quite different feeling in my gut, I must say. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. Well, the reason this time is that we are working on Plan B, which means we don't have actually permission to do what we're doing. So it is a sort of a grab and run thing. Here we enter into the hills. So I guess we're finally on the way. In the wrong direction. Okay. Let's get out of here.
I think it widens out over there.
This place used to be a bodega, and I remember it because of that staircase. And this is where I made my contact. Now the funny thing about this bodega is that it is just around the corner from the army barracks. Now, it seems to be still a sort of a cafeteria.
So,
anyway.
So you came here initially?
Well,
this is where they told you to come?
Well, that is what my contact was. Somebody said you go to this and you ask for Pepe. And you ask for a Hatue beer. A Hatue was the local beer at that time. And that would be the code. So as we were driving off in the morning, of all the places to drive past, we drive straight past the army barracks, which are virtually around the corner from this place here, as you will see. See, there it is, right here.
This was with the rebels.
That was with the rebels sitting next to me in the car. Those are the army barracks. And as I was driving past here, of course, there were guard posts, and there was a machine gun up there on that tower. I think it was a little bit daring what they did. Now, if all goes well, this is the road. I'm pretty sure that this is the road we took. And we drove along this river.
Can't see it.
All right, so I was coming down here, and then he said, make a turn. So I turned into one of these narrow side roads, and we just drove on for a little while until we got to real heavy bushes. Okay, so I then just drove it off the main highway, and I just ended up in a bush. Now my car is parked in this bush. The battery is disconnected. I have a gunny bag with a couple of small cameras and a little bit of film, a bottle of water, a pair of jungle boots, and I set off. I go back to this road. There comes a tractor comes along there. There's a tractor and comes along with a flatbed behind it with all sorts of characters on it. They all sort of wear straw hats and carry machetes going sugar caning. Then I jump on it. And we come to a little river crossing. And there the tractor doesn't go any further. He says, all right, from here you're on your walk, basically, you know, the old saying. And so I say goodbye to all these guys, and then I walk across, and then I notice that all these guys follow me. They were all people that were trying to join Castro.
Yo canto porque el presente no es de pena ni es de llanto. Por eso es que cuando canto, canto lo que el pueblo siente.
Soy del pueblo, pueblo soy, y a donde me lleve el pueblo voy.
The people that made up the contingent at La Plata were a total cross-section of the Cuban society. You had anything from sugar cane cutters to students. You had accountants from the city, a couple of school teachers, a college professor, and there were people from the high society of Cuba, sons of the high society. Now, some of them were certainly there for the adventure. Others were there in a belief that Castro really could do something for Cuba.
Por el pueblo voy pasando y oyendo tu sentimiento.
There were a few women up there called the mujeres. They were not to be touched by the males, although some of the leaders had their embedded girlfriend, shall we say. They were all talking about the cause. The cause was sacred. It was the cause and the promise. And those were two words that were always used, the promise and the cause.
Porque al pueblo pertenezco.
Soy del pueblo, pueblo soy. Y a donde me lleve el pueblo voy.
These people were sincere up there. They wanted to have a revolution. They wanted a betterment for their children, a betterment for their families. They wanted to get rid of corruption. And I'm sure that Castro wanted it. Same thing.
Canto lo que el pueblo siente y canto porque el presente no es de llanto ni es de pena.
Soy del pueblo, pueblo soy. Y a donde me lleve el pueblo voy.
Almost there, so you don't need to.
You can take it easy.
Fast.
I think this is there's a checkpoint here. This is where you find out about the guards.
Yeah. Guide. We go in to the oficina.
What do we do next?
Buenos días.
¿Podemos ayudarlo?
Buenas.
La Plata.
Ya. Deben pasar por la oficina para pagar la entrada al Parque Nacional y demás.
Okay. Let's go.
Cinco. Eco tour. Wow. Muchas gracias.
Where's your bag, babe?
Camera bag?
Yeah.
In the front.
Oh, why don't we bring the bag?
Sure. No, we should. They didn't say anything about a guide.
Well, and if we don't need a guide, just go. Don't ask.
Don't ask questions.
No.
Then you get an answer.
Exactly.
It's true.
The only thing would be
I would cool it a little bit. Okay. Well, all right. Now we'll have this.
Got a guide?
Español, no?
Oh, okay. Okay. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Okay, fellas. Let's go. So going up the hill, I guess it's, if you were to walk it now, it's 3 hours. That makes it, of course, much shorter. Also, I'm not as young anymore as I used to be. So you can imagine what it was like climbing these hills.
Wow.
very, very steep. Oh, look at this,
Yeah.
look at this.
Holy mackerel.
Okay, fellas. That was about as steep as I ever want to drive a car. Okay, as they call it in the movies, from here on we walk. Brakes are on, first gear is in, and we go. It's quite warm today, but then it's always been warm. One man had met us at the river crossing. Then we set off walking. And after 1 hour we stopped because we had come to a little hut. You have to understand that after 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, you can hardly walk anymore because it is so hot. So you have to wait until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So our progress was very, very slow indeed. One thing that certainly hasn't changed in 50 years is the heat. The heat and the hills. It's still as steep as they were then, and it's still as hot as it was then.
Para acá, para acá.
At one time, I remember, we came to a hut in the middle of nowhere, and they had, of all places, in the middle of nowhere, they had a billiard table there. And we played billiard. I don't know how they ever got a billiard table up there, but I mean, they did. So it took us endlessly to get up there. We were trying to join a revolution, and nobody knew where that revolution was. Whenever you ask, who says, well, up there, you know, was always up there. And I think we zigzagged up that hill because when I finally came down, I did it in 2 days. But when we went up, I think it took us 3 weeks. It was a long, long walk. Until finally one day, I got up to the top of the hill, and that's where I met the rebel. There he stood. Big, tall, much taller than the average Cuban. And I instantly knew it was Fidel Castro. He had this aura around him. You could see who he was. You could understand why these people followed him. And there he stood, looked at me, and said, "Welcome to Cuba Libre." And then the next question he threw at me was, "Who are you?" And I wanted to say, well, I'm a famous reporter from a big American television company, and I'm writing for the New York Times or whatever. And I felt silly. And I said, I am nobody. And he sort of looked, smiled, and says, we all have to start somewhere. And I think that this broke the ice between us. Also, he said, well, how do the people feel about our revolutionary movement, our quest for liberty? Because he knew that the Americans go very much for the quest of liberty and all that. I said, you know, I don't think the Americans know all that much about you. And perhaps this is one of the reasons I am here. Now, will you give me an interview? I think all this thing came out in the first sort of 30 minutes, you know. And from then on, a sort of rapport established between us, mostly through an interpreter, because his English wasn't very good. I mean, he was very broken. So after I met Castro, he said, for everything you need, just call on Celia. Celia Sanchez was his right hand, basically. I mean, she arranged everything. Who was incidentally also his mistress, but this is something else. Celia was slightly older than Fidel. She was a sort of mother figure. Very clever, very astute, and very loyal. She defended Fidel all the way to the end. Raúl and Che Guevara, they weren't there when I came there. By the time I got there, Castro had split his effective into 3 fronts. One was the Sierra Maestra, which was his own headquarters, centered on La Plata. The other one was the Sierra Cristal, with Raúl in command. And the third one was Che Guevara in Santa Clara, and Santa Clara province, of course.
See, this is the whole thing is just on a mountainside. The only way to build these houses was to build them on stilts, and it's amazing that they held up for so long. Of course, the roofs had been redone, but the whole layout here is such that you cannot actually see it from the air. The one thing they were most worried about was air attacks, and the soldiers went about ready to slug their way through the jungle, and I guess this is the way that they survived. This is Radio Rebellion, and this is where I spent at least 1 month, if not more, towards the end of my stay here. I shared it with Orlando Payret, who was the mechanic who kept this thing going, and Fidel came up every night and did his radio broadcast. And I mean, this is one thing that Batista never understood, how vital that nightly broadcast really was. I mean, considering that at any one time Fidel probably had 200 to maximum 500 people, and Batista had regiments and regiments. It were these broadcasts here that made the difference, because here Fidel promised the Cuban people
you know, to give them land, to stop the feudalism, land feudalism. Lots of promises. And I guess in the beginning he believed in them. As did I must say.
Aquí Radio Rebelde, hablando a nombre del movimiento 26 de julio y el ejército rebelde. Pueblo de Cuba, el tirano ha huido. Los principales asesinos se han dado a la fuga más precipitada ante el empuje incontenible del ejército rebelde.
Fidel was certainly the first Latino who understood what the media really means in a revolution. I discovered books on his shelf. One of them certainly was about Goebbels and the Third Reich, the propaganda minister of the Third Reich, who was a brilliant, evil brilliant, but I mean he was the first one to understand what the media really could do for a political movement. And I think that Fidel certainly learned a lot from that. He used the media, he used people like Herb Matthews or myself certainly, to get the message across.
Do you ask help from the US or Canada? What we want is only the sympathies of their people and the neutrality of their government. We have several Americans with us, not any Canadian. We should like, as a symbolic representation of that wonderful country. But remember, they ought to get with them that Stern machine gun so good that you, the Canadian, make.
All right, that house there behind me on stilts, that's the Commandancia. This is where Fidel was. On the left was his sort of working room, and on the right was his bedroom. I haven't sat on that bench for 50 years. But I did sit on the bench together with Celia and Fidel, and we drank coffee, endless cups of coffee, and they kept telling me about the glorious future and all the plans that they had. And there is a photograph taken of Fidel and me standing just here. I must have been somewhere around here because I remember there was this roof was behind us. Well, I am here, he is no longer here.
Tienen las mismas paredes.
Yeah. This is where the... Well, this is where you lived. Well, there's something interesting here. I don't know if you have enough light to get these shelves, but on these shelves there were books. And I remember the first thing somebody asked me when I came out, what kind of books does he read? And they were all books about revolutions, of course, about fighting, but I can assure you there was not a single book by either Marx or Engels or anything that connected him anywhere to a leftist movement. There wasn't. I mean, I was in here quite frequently. I was sort of the only visitor in this camp for a long, long time because nobody else came up. And I must say that sometimes I came in on my own because, there was always open anyway. But I couldn't find any book that remotely connected him to any leftist movement.
His bed is in here?
Yeah, it was sometimes shared by Celia. You know, when you heard them talking in the evening, we discussed. I mean, he was quite interested in what happened in Canada, what happened in the United States, and this is actually where the interview was concocted, because I must say it was concocted. I mean, the deal was that I would get an interview with serious answers, but in English. And Fidel didn't speak English, so we had to almost phonetically teach him what to say. Fidel understood more than anybody else at the time the power of television. He wanted to get on American television, he wanted to get on British television, and of course he wanted to get on Canadian television. And if he wanted to get onto the air, he had to speak in English. Now, there was a high school professor up there who spoke very good English. The way it worked was that the professor translated my questions to Fidel in Spanish. Fidel gave him immediately the reply, which the professor took down by longhand. And that's why for days and days he verbally learned the answers in English that this professor wrote down on a piece of paper. And I think he must have memorized my questions. He keyed himself to my question, that I had to ask the question that was on that piece of paper, basically.
How long can you hold out as you are now? What is your personal assessment of Batista? Would you call him a dictator? Why does the army support Batista? What percentage of population supports you? How does your family feel about you? You have had little success so far to overthrow Batista. On what do you base your hopes to overthrow Batista?
Él dice que nosotros hemos tenido poco éxito, ¿eh?
On what do you base your hopes to overthrow Batista?
No. The question complete.
You've had little success so far. On what do you base your hopes to overthrow Batista?
You are mistaken. You are mistaken. Who had little success in defeating us was Batista. All just fight of a people for freedom always get victory. Soon or late, facts have proved our faith. Facts have proved my faith. You are mistaken. The one who had little success in defeating us was Batista. All just fight of a people for freedom always get victory, soon or late. Facts have proved my faith. Don't you like?
I think Castro was, in the beginning, he was certainly a romantic. He was a romantic, a nationalist, an egocentric, certainly an egocentric. Everything was centered around Castro. His main motive certainly was, first of all, Fidel Castro.
That is a question of impossible answer for me, because I never would be Castro alive. Like Henry Adams, we say, give me liberty or give me death.
I think it was probably the first time that somebody got to see this man, how he really was, or at least how he pretended he really was. He never talked about politics, he always talked about Cuba. In other words, his address was directly national and not political.
Would you seize lands of absentee owners, or would you expropriate foreign holdings?
Not. We don't think to seize any land to anybody. What we will do is to buy those lands that we out of production to give them to poor countrymen.
Of course, it was politically going against Batista, but it had nothing, had no connotation about communism or leftism or Marxism or whatever. We shall expropriate. No, he never said that. He just said there will be egalidad, everybody will get the same thing. He will make sure that there will be agrarian reform. So it always was a very nationalistic line.
How do you plan now to seize the power? We are not fighting for power. We are fighting for finishing tyranny. And then our movement will seize power by free election. We don't want power by force.
I think he was sincere to a certain part anyway. When he said, I'm a nationalist, I want elections and all. I don't know about the elections, probably. He never thought he wanted to be. He also said he didn't want to be president. I think that was not quite true.
I don't think in being president. I am not fighting for that, nor for any other charge. I cannot answer you about myself because I don't think about that.
That I was manipulated, of course I was manipulated, but then Castro is a wonderful and great manipulator, has always been one.
Well, I cannot tell you exactly when. I only can tell you that he will be overthrown, and very soon. I hope to shake hands with you again in free Cuba, not too late that you become an old man.
Well, that's why I stayed. Something tells me this is not it. This is one of the huts I may have saved. That is amazing. That is it. That is it. Yeah, that's it. That's it, all right. 3 lenses, of which I didn't have 3. The magazine went on like that, and there was a metal spring that ran from that pinion to that pinion, and that ran the camera. And the sound was recorded inside the camera. It's a sound. It was the first ever sound on film recording camera. And I don't know. It's called an Oricon 100. And I had it modified in Ottawa just before I left, so that was in July 1958. And after I had done the interview, Fidel said, "You cannot take it with you. It's much too dangerous, because if they catch you with this thing in the car, they know where you've come from, and they would shoot you." And he insisted, although I wanted to take it along, but he insisted I leave it here, and he said, "I'll send it on to you." Well, he did send on the film. He never sent on the camera, though. I'm amazed they kept it here. That is an amazing thing. That's It's quite moving to find this thing, because let's face it, this is what started me on my career. That piece of metal, very primitive as the sound is primitive and the camera is primitive. But when it comes down to it, that thing is worth gold, at least gold to me, because ever I since put this camera down in the mountains of Cuba. Yeah, it's 50 years of hurricanes, and see, the amazing thing about this, finding it now, is that it basically has survived 50 years, just as I survived 50 years. And some of these years were pretty rough. But it shows that human flesh is just about as tough as metal. Well, that is quite emotional, I must say. That is amazing. Just amazing. Well, before I start crying, shall we go on? What happened to my glasses? I haven't done that. I don't want to get sentimental, but I don't know how to explain the feeling in this moment. It's quite strong. I was a poor boy when I left this behind. Well, things changed afterwards. I went from one war to the next one. I interviewed all the great personalities in this world. I mean, in short order, I interviewed Kennedy and Khrushchev. I did Ben Gurion. I did NASA. I went to China and to Taiwan and saw Chiang Kai-shek. I then was invited to China and I met Zhou Enlai. Those are the big ones, and then of course there are the thousands of smaller ones, potentates. I saw the Ayatollah, I saw Saddam Hussein, Allende, Pinochet. It's 50 years is a long time. As the New York Times once wrote in an article, it said, he's seen more wars than any living general. And I guess it is true. Because when you sort of race around the world, spend years and years in Vietnam, years in the Gulf, all those crazy revolutions, the war in Iraq, Iran. Oh God. The camera is here and I'm here. It started with this camera and I come back to it. It is a full circle. It's a full lifetime. What's 50 years in that man's life?
Today, 1/3 of the Cuban territory is in the Cuban freedom fighters' hands. And very soon, all our country will be free.
¡Viva Cuba libre! ¡Libertad o muerte!
Aquí pensaban seguir ganando el 100% con casas de apartamentos y echar al pueblo a sufrir y seguir de modo cruel contra el pueblo conspirando para seguirlo explotando, y en eso llegó Fidel. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar. Aquí pensaban seguir tragando y tragando tierra, sin sospechar que en la sierra se alumbraba el porvenir, y seguir de modo cruel la costumbre del delito, hacer de Cuba un garito, y en eso llegó Fidel. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar. Y se acabó la diversión, llegó el comandante y mandó a parar.